but the main focus of this documentary will be how art directing is used in film and how it has been used in film and why it has such a big effect on the industry today. Art directing is one of the most important components of any film production and makes a film what it visually is and builds up to why some films have been so successful. Every day the art directing world is developing with new movies, television programs, new magazines and many more. But the main focus for this documentary will be how lighting, costume, set design and everything down to the smallest prop on set is down to the art director and their team. Besides editing and acting, art directing takes over nearly every aspect of filming. An extreme amount of thought and work has to go into this part of production because it is one of the main components and is what the film works around. The reason for this is that everything in film revolves around set, costume and lighting, and if one of these components are missing, it can completely change the movie. So they are things that have to be handled with care and knowledge to nail what the producers are trying to achieve. Art directing isn't just about creativity. Art directing is about being a historian, an architect, an artist in many different fields, a photographer, a fashion designer, and many more things to build up to make the visual treat in a movie. Someone that is best known for their art directing and also believes that art direction includes all these things is Eve Stewart and has extreme success in her field from working in films such as Les Miserables, The King's Speech, Danish Girl. And as you can see, each of these movies carry a huge amount of work in set design and costume because firstly they were set in a previous time and are attempting to accurately portray groups of people from different periods of time, hence why she claims being a historian is vital to being an art director. Eve Stewart is someone that's an inspiration to the art directing world because of how well she has brought certain events from previous times to life. And this is what's so special about specific art directors because people start to feel a connection with the time the movies were set in and gives people understanding of what it was like to live in that time, which gives them knowledge that Eve has collected through the process and brings forward this information through a story which in a way is beautiful and less draining than just reading a book, which she would have done. However, going back 100 years, art production wasn't as easy as it seemed from maybe looking at the old black and white silent movie productions. 1915 saw their first Hollywood blockbuster silent movie called The Birth of a Nation, which was released over 100 years ago. And from looking at scenes of this movie, you can see how far we have come over these years in terms of how films are art directed. As you can see from this movie and from many other movies, productions back at this time were very different to how they were today. Even though they told a story, films would have always been quite similar and not very advanced. After this film came out, movies started becoming extremely popular and would eventually spread over the whole world, beginning with things such as plays were staged in theatre, right through to the golden age of Hollywood, which began after/during the Great Depression, which was prior to the Second World War and after the First, where countries around the world were in a state of depression. And to bring the beat back up, Hollywood issued thousands of movies which were upbeat and fantasizing to the population of the world to give people hope and something to laugh about, something to cry about, and something to bring everyone together and distract them from what's really happened in the world. And this was called the Golden Age of Hollywood. The Golden Age of Hollywood technically began in the mid-1920s, which are best known as the Roaring Twenties because of the exorbitant freewheeling popular culture of the decade. The Roaring Twenties were a time where many people defined prohibition, indulged themselves in new styles of dancing and dressing, and this is where it perfectly fits into art directing. It was a time of change. The world of film was rapidly developing and art direction was vital at this time to produce a hit blockbuster. Loud, vibrant costumes, everything from feathers to sequins and formal and fitted suits. This was a time of relief, and this ideology was being shown through the power of film. Piccadilly is a 1920s smash hit movie best known for their extravagant use of costume and set design, and this film represents a lot of conventions that other movies from this time use. This production shows that Hollywood wasn't the only place that was roaring during the 20s, hence the title Piccadilly. The feature film was quickly scripted by the talented Arnold Bennett and portrays London to be a seductive yet divided city. In the West End, the women and men are expensively dressed, eating expensive food and setting the dance floor alight, whilst in the East, the working class immigrants work in steely pubs. This ideology of the city being divided is being represented through the use of costume and set, and without this there wouldn't be a noticeable divide, which applies for many other films of the time. As you can see, even for such an unadvanced film, movies still had a focus on glamorous to grungy sets and as well as costumes, and this proves that this is one of the main components of any movie. A big factor of the majority of these motion pictures is that the fact they are filmed in black and white. At the time, this would have been a lot easier compared to modern day filming in terms of makeup and colour and costumes of the sets, because nowadays it is a lot more of a challenge because colour is one of the biggest components. As time went on, the film gradually started developing into something even more beautiful and extravagant, and different genres of film were coming from every corner, and this meant a whole new range of costume, different wild sets, and wacky use of lighting and props, all put together again to make another hit movie. Genres like science fiction and action movies especially brought a lot of different art direction ideas to the table due to the nature of these movies, which is sets that can take explosions, sets which look like they're out of space, lighting to give illusions to the viewer, and this would have been a lot of work on the art directing teams back then and would have consumed a lot of time and money. A film that follows these conventions is a film from 1956 called Forbidden Planet. This film shows the use of costume and set as well as lighting at this time, which is around 60 years ago. It's fascinating to see their use of costume and set not long after colour in film became accessible, and you can tell by looking at clips of this film that they are using it to their advantage. The art directors for this movie were Cedric Gibbons alongside Arthur Lonergan, and as shown, they use wacky and vast sets to really make it look like they're on a different planet by using different colours, different backgrounds, and especially take advantage of the lighting and collaborate them all to produce something amazing. Even though this movie did not win awards, I feel like it was an admirable production, though for the time it was made, and includes a lot of conventions that this genre of movie do today, and it's an inspiration to see how even with limited technology they can still construct detailed sets and appropriate costume, which is very admirable aspects and shows that this part of producing a movie is the most creative yet most accessible, because these things do not take advanced technology. Moving on to the present day, art directors get a much bigger amount of recognition compared to 50 to 60 years ago. This is because nowadays art directors' jobs are so much harder than they were in the past. Like previously said, art directors aren't only the creative mind to the production, they are the historians, the architects, the visionaries, and without this part of the production team, the movie would be an empty shell. As mentioned previously, a current director whose work is worldwide inspirational is Eve Stewart. Here, Eve talks to Creative England about her being a production designer and speaks out on how much work goes in and what it really entails. Like previously stated earlier in the documentary, she has worked on many award-winning big blockbuster movies. Eve is experienced and has worked in the industry for a long time, so listening to her is very informal.
I'd come 6 months before we start filming, but usually about 12 weeks before we start filming, so a good 2 to 4 weeks before the rest of the crew. And that gives you a chance to work through the script with the director and work out where this story is going to be set. Is it contemporary? Is it urban?
As you can see, there are so many components to what art directors do. 6 months before a production is an extremely long time for research, so art directors' work is partially unrecognised. The films that Eve has worked on have all had something to do with being set in the past, or they have had specific costumes, and I believe that she has worked on a variety of the most challenging films in the field. She has worked on Les Miserables, which was set in the French Revolution, which took place in the 1700s. So even this meant she had to be a historian and an architect, so she knows what buildings at the time, what people wore at the time, and what was actually socially accepted at the time. Considering this isn't even set in Britain, this brings more of a challenge to the table. Another film she has worked on is Danish Girl, again, which is set in 1912, which was over 100 years ago, and again set in France. Eve talks to Screen Stuff about how she is inspired by the smallest things on her sets.
I was looking through a book of forgotten places in London and found this pumping station, which is where they pump sewage, actually, in South London. And it's just been opened up, and so you can go into it. And I was blown away by the ornament and the texture and the kind of scale of the place. And we became very fascinated by the level of science that was in there. And it's like everybody's dream. It's like being in the shed at the bottom of your garden where great discoveries are made. And so we kind of really ran with that ball and decided then that actually Victor lived upstairs. So we built the top part of his apartment in Ealing Studios, but replicated the floor of Crossness, so it looked like, he was upstairs and the lights and the fumes were all downstairs.